these issues. And by the way, thank you to your organization and Mike, what you do, putting on these kind of forums where we get all you people in the same room and all us people in the same room is absolutely spectacular. And it was, I'm starting my 5th year with him, and prior to that 14 years in the Minnesota House. And what's interesting is you get, unfortunately, there's only a handful of people every year that focus on technology and telecommunications. Back in my day, it was, I took an interest in my tenure there and carried and worked on a lot of legislation along with Senator Kelly, who's in the room over in the Senate. Now we have, Schmidt and Sheldon Johnson and Joe Hoppe and others, Creshaw in the legislature who have picked up the mantle. There's always a few, but it's not a lot because it isn't sexy, right? I know you all think it is, but when Representative Stanek was here earlier talking, he admitted he didn't work on telecom issues when he was in the legislature. It was more fun for him to do laws that kept or threw people in jail. That's what he worked on, Representative Finstead, I don't know how much he worked on telecom, but he had a lot of fun working on the Twin Stadium. There's a lot of other things that we enjoy doing, healthcare, education, all those things. The legislatures tend to be sexier than telecom. But when I mention, public safety, healthcare, education, they all have the telecom connection. And we forget that, and that's why you all are in the room, and that's why hopefully you've always got champions to do that. And now moving to the federal level, Senator Franken, and again, of course I'm going to brag about him, he's my boss, but you're going to hear from our other senator later today too. Between the two of them, Senator Franken, as you remember, in 2008 got elected, and it was an outstanding win, and we had this little thing called a recount, if you remember. Senator Franken did not take office until July of 2009. 7 months later, we are setting policy on what you do. And don't discount that in any way, shape, or form. That you ought to be meeting on a staff level in the state or in DC, we have staff that works on it, or with the senators themselves. If you're on a day on the Hill in DC, or you have a legislative or public policy meeting within your organization or something we should be at, let us know. Because we are carrying that message on your behalf. We represent you, and that's what's happening. Mike also told me real quickly, Brad, to touch on a couple things, and we heard about it earlier, but let's not leave the room without acknowledging that there's a big issue on net neutrality coming, right? And I know there's some people in this room that push back on that, so let's acknowledge that too. But there's a whole lot of other people that were on the other side. So with that in mind, I just wanted to mention that Senator Franken's a big supporter of net neutrality and been one of the leaders on it, along with Wyden and Booker, and there's Sanders. There's a handful of senators that have really, really pushed hard on this. And as you know, Wheeler, FCC Chair Wheeler, put out the order 2 weeks ago that net neutrality was going to be voted on, I think, next week at their meeting. And so, he laid it out. And essentially, it's no blocking, no throttling, no paid prioritization. All the things that I think, as people learn about what the internet is, was, and should be, assumed that none of that would or could happen. And I think you all know too, 80% of the public, when they understand net neutrality and are issued hold on it, support the net neutrality, the basic net neutrality principle. And, it's businesses. We talked earlier about that business that starts in the bedroom. That business wants equal access to the internet. But it's not just businesses, it's journalists. Tom Hauser was just journalists and bloggers. They don't want anyone picking and choosing who gets quicker access to your screen when you're looking for a news source or a blog. It's artists, it's investors, but it's big businesses too. And I think, especially the public policy people know, we've had a lot of large Fortune 500 companies come to us and come to DC weighing in positively on the net neutrality issue. In our office, we've seen letters and had conversations with government relations folks from Ford, from Visa, from Bank of America, from United Parcel Service, all supportive of the net neutrality issue. So it's one of those things, I don't like to consider it a regulation coming out of DC. It's really a non-regulation, keeping things open and keeping them neutral. And as Senator Franken says, I think it's the free speech issue of the 21st century. And I think it helps us all to acknowledge that, but then move ahead and come to us with suggestions. When FCC makes rulings, then the legislative branch usually gets the opportunity to tweak those rulings or those standards that we live under. And certainly that's what we're going to do with net neutrality, should it move the way we suspect it's going to. And we want to hear from you on that. We don't assume that the conversation is done, and I'm sure you haven't. Just very quickly, again, I want to emphasize what Colleen Landkamer said. There's a lot of money that we put forth in government for loan guarantees, for grants, for public-private partnerships, and really that's what we need. It's not government's job, and I don't believe in any way, shape, or form, to build out or own your systems for the most part. But we are seeing some of that. You saw President Obama the other day, or a month or two ago, come out with his priorities for broadband and competition, and a lot of it is focused on the municipalities and the rules that govern whether or not they can get into the game or not, mostly in other states. But he did cite Scott County in his presentation as a model that he's looking at and the administration is looking at as that type of partnership that worked, involving municipalities and providers in a co-op setting, and how that hopefully is playing out in Minnesota. So they're keeping an eye on Minnesota again. And I want to emphasize that there's dollars out there and things we need to do. It was 2 years ago we heard at one of these meetings, Mike, on the Healthcare Connect funds, and I hope a lot of you have taken advantage of that. We've sent out in the last year $134 million to rural healthcare providers to pay for 65% of their costs for equipment and for service. And so if you're a service provider in rural Minnesota, there's no reason whatsoever you shouldn't be working with your healthcare people to get payment of 65% and get them online and get them connected with high-speed or broadband connection. So, there's whole slews of them. We have staff and others to do it. But again, I come in from a broader public policy standpoint, and maybe I'll finish with this right now, Brad, is that I don't think, and I know, government cannot keep up with technology, right? That's why it's so hard to regulate in this arena. We were talking about 1 megabyte speeds not that long ago in the legislature. Now they're up to 10. And as you know, FCC also has issued a rule that you won't be able to call broadband unless it's 25 coming up. And I don't know if that's the right number, but it's a moving target, and you all, technology-wise, move so much faster and more rapid than the slow, deliberate government process, which is, there's a reason for that. But again, we're trying to make those fits and trying to basically stay out of your way, only stepping in when it's absolutely necessary. And I hope you believe that, because it's absolutely the truth. So I'll stop there.